Johnson, and this is focused on Liberia. Hit it! From Cape Mount to Cape Palmas, Mount Nimba to Atlantic Ocean, Obomi Hills to Boakai, to educate, elevate, and promote. Yeah, focus on Liberia. For Liberia, Liberia. For Liberia, yeah. From Monday to Sunday. From Monday to Sunday. It's focus on Liberia. Talk about home affairs. Hey. In diaspora. Current affairs. Reliable information. History. Ooh. Talking about culture. Politics. Education. Entertainment. Business. Sports. Advertisement. Articulation. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. From Monday to Sunday. Focus on.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Friday Night Debate on Focus on Liberia. Tonight, debate is going to take a slightly different trend. Jimmy and I are going to look at some key issues, things that are really bothering my mind that I think that we should talk about. Number one, the level of criticism against President or former President George Weah at the time he was president. If you compare that to the level of criticism against the current president, Joseph Numa Boakai, what do we think? Do you think that there is some level of hypocrisy? Will we allow one person, and if the same things are happening, are we being quiet, or kind of in a way not crying loud enough? I want us to talk about that, and we're going to give some examples, Jimmy. Also, we're going to talk about the analysis of the whole anti-drug initiatives. Those are the two things we're going to be discussing. And the goal here is to ask the question and bring you, our audience, in to respond. We're not going to be providing all the answers, but we'll be asking all the questions so that we all can discuss. Let me welcome Jimmy Eastman from the nation's capital. Welcome, Jimmy.
Hey, Dennis, good to be here. I like this analysis we're coming to here tonight.
I do too. We want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. If you have not already done so, please invite someone, share the broadcast, and let's talk. And Jimmy, personally, I think one of the problems we have, and that's what I want us to talk about tonight, is the way we criticize, the way we see wrong, but we do that at a time when we are out. When we are in, all the things that we used to see no longer exist. And I'm going to walk you through some examples. So I have a comparative grade criticism leveled against President George Weah that, based on current reports, could also be applied to President Joseph Numa Boakai, yet are not receiving the same level of public scrutiny. And let me say this before I start, Jimmy. Let me set the premise. Personally, I believe that George Weah, if we look at the level the country was at before the war, George Weah, who have never become president in the first place, and I stand by that. But because the way the country was handled under President Sirleaf, it brought about some form of frustration that people wanted a change, that people were upset with the ones my friend will call intelligentsia elite, the educated people. So right after the war, where we have a lot of youthful population that saw a popular guy, they said, well, if the people that are all the way at the top, they cannot look at us. If one of us get there, that person is going to feel the same way we feel and will be able to relate to us in the first place and address the concerns that we have. Had President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf performed, superbly, probably that wouldn't have happened. And I believe no matter how you come to power, if you do the right thing, you move the country from A to B or even to D, people are going to even forget the way you came. And I give an example. President Doe assassinated President Tolbert and killed a lot of people. Had Doe turned the country around, do you think we were going to really be talking the things we saying today? Had he done the right thing, he would have been our own Gerald Rollins, right? But instead, because he repeated, if not quadrupled, the ills he came to correct, those things came back. Same with Charles Taylor. Even after the death of 250,000 Liberians and the displacement of almost 1 million people, had Taylor turned things around and make Liberia like Dubai or like, Sweden, we wouldn't be still, criticizing Taylor. So I believe even with with my understanding that Weah wouldn't have should have not become president in the first place, but had he leveraged the kind of popular support he had, we wouldn't even remember that he was not qualified to be president, in my view. Just where I want to start from, Jim. I don't want to get to it before we even go into the discussion.
Mm-hmm. Well, they say that human psychology leans toward remembering negative events more strongly than positive ones.
Yeah.
So scandals, crises, and failures often stick in the minds of the public because they provoke stronger emotions. So there is also the power of narrative. Bad presidencies often have dramatic stories, wars, economic collapse, corruption. They are easy to retell. But good presidencies may be marked with steady governance and gradual progress, which can feel less newsworthy. So sometimes the relevance is taken when you feel it in the pocket.
Yeah.
And then lastly, people's political affiliations, they also shape which presidencies they see good or bad, and it gets written over. So many believed when Talbot was dethroned, when he was overthrown, they felt that he was a bad presidency. He was a bad president. But see, nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
he's as the best president we'll ever have.
Yeah.
So what has changed that the people realize now that it wasn't such a bad presidency?
Right.
You know, I think what it is, what really is opportunities. I think as much as Tolbert had his ways, he had his brother in the Senate, he had his other brother at the finance, his son at where agriculture or whatever he was doing. But there were opportunities. People could see
Right.
opportunities. There were a lot of opportunities. Even Boakai, President Boakai mentioned that when he was coming out, you could get a job.
Right. And
Now,
Jimmy, because the way our minds work is we compare, right? So if you compare now to prior, you say, oh, we have opportunities then. But let's say if President Doe had done something to even create more opportunities, right? But when you look, in fact, during the war, when we were so hungry, you just think about dry rice and red oil, and you are so, it's like you want it. Because even though when you had dry rice and red palm oil, you thought you were suffering, it was poor quality.
Yeah.
But now because there was nothing, you say, so that's the way we tend to look at it. We compare and say, well, it was better. Even if you go to the Bible, the Israelites say, oh, it was at least in Egypt we were eating right. But let me go to what I want us to talk about first. That is the comparison. And I will address some questions, but here is where I want to start. When we compare, so the issues that existed under President Weah, for which a lot of us criticize him vociferously, the same issues sometimes come under President Boakai. And let me give you an example. Corruption. Rampant corruption, scandals, including missing banknotes and unaccounted funds. Those were the things under Weah we criticize him.
Right.
When it came to Boakai, President Boakai, allegations of poor accountability and governance structure. But I believe the public reaction is less, there's less public outrage, there is muted criticism when it comes to corruption. Nepotism and appointing allies and family members to key positions. Remember the whole Southeastern thing? When it came to Boakai, we have controversial appointments, including foreign nationals over qualified Liberians. But criticized by some, but that criticism is now widespread. In fact, sometimes you hear justification that Boakai can employ people from Lofa, but they are qualified, or Lofa has 6 ethnic groups. The drug epidemic, there was a rise in drug abuse among youth, and there was a lack of effective response, and we all criticized. When it came to President Boakai arrest agenda, the promises, action, but the drug issues persist. But President Boakai is still seen as a reformer despite those kind of challenges. And I'll go down. Economic mismanagement, inflation, poor fiscal policy, and failed cash injection schemes. Under President Boakai, we see economic hardship continues. Unemployment remains high. But the blame is often shifted to the previous administration. Say, well, the policies they put in now, there is a spillover effect. The flying of private jets and opulence, right? Weah was criticized for lavish lifestyle and national poverty. Boakai administration has faced similar accusations, though they're being less prominently reported. The public is largely silent and sometimes defensive, right? Remember the condominium and all that? We are learning that there are the same thing happening in Foya. And the same way we couldn't see pictures is the same thing that's happening. Failure to prosecute crimes, no war crimes code under Weah, impunity, of officials. Under President Boakai, we still don't see any major prosecution yet for the past or the current administration, but the expectation remains, and then the criticism smile. Maybe because of his. Then when we come to rule of law, Weah was criticized for engineering the removal of Justice Janin. Under President Boakai, we have 2 Supreme Court decisions, major ones, one on tenure and the other one during the House Speaker crisis. President Boakai ignored both. But his action was rationalized as non-interference. And let me give you the last one and give you a chance to talk. On mill, under President Weah, on mill left. And so President Weah and his group, they were always blaming the economic issues on the departure of Omil. But we didn't feel sorry for him. I think I hosted some show where we say, well, bring your own on-mill. Ellen brought on-mill. Create your own economic opportunities. Under President Boakai, USAID left. And it's like the whole world was crashing, and we justify, say, well, USAID, these people, they were doing this, they were doing that, they were supporting the schools. And we're trying to feel sorry for the Boakai administration compared to the Weah administration when they were complaining that because on-mill left, that's why things are so bad. Those are just few that I'm throwing at you, Jimmy. What do you think?
Well, again, how you control the narrative is very important. And the aesthetic, the way things, the optics, you have to be careful with the optics. And maybe that is why there's more sympathy given to the Boakai administration. There was some things that were going on during the Weah administration, and we didn't see him taking any corrective steps at all. The same people kept their positions. I think only one or two people ever lost positions during his tenure. But we've seen President Boakai replacing a lot of people already. I see him replacing more in the future. So that kind of makes people think that he's doing something. He's being critical. He's being analytical. He's not just paying less attention. It looks like he's paying close attention to how people are performing. And when it comes to I think it's kind of early still to compare the two administrations because they've only been there going on 2 years. Yeah, so it's kind of early.
18 months.
We can already see some things happen. One remarkable thing I saw that the Weah administration did was they kept the U.S. on the Liberian dollar on par with the U.S. It was pretty stable. I thought that was essential because if the U.S. had started, the Liberian dollar had started dropping, people wouldn't be able to buy food. People wouldn't be able to buy anything. This hardship would have been more. So by keeping, especially with the exodus of Unimill, millions of dollars left the country. So you would have thought there was been a serious drop on the Liberian market, but no, they managed to handle it. And when I look at supply and demand, I like how these guys, they just kept the supply low, or what did they do? So right now, look at what since the administration take over, it's gone to 2-1. It's already climbing. And you say just left, so we haven't really felt the effects of it yet. But you say was those aid money were being included in budget, so I think we'll start seeing more and more effect of the departure of USAID next year. And so it's what this administration will have to do, just what you hit on the nail. They have to create opportunities, and that is when they will show that they've done a better job than the Weah administration, because
but you said something very important, the economics, right? Mm-hmm. So what you just said concerning the US dollar, right? Are you hearing any praise of the Weah administration doing that? Are people giving Weah the credit? Because, or is it, and why is that? Is it because, like I started saying, that he shouldn't have been president in the first? Is it because we just think, oh, he's incompetent, that we're not really looking at anything?
I don't know why they don't look at that. That's what I look at more, especially because if that last administration was so incompetent, the Liberian dollar would have dropped like a hot potato. But it showed that they did exercise some responsibility. I don't know, we can call it twernomics.
To economics.
Twernomics, where go dig hole, cover hole, and
Right.
all those kind of.
Borrow
But
initiative.
yeah, and even with all the missing money, millions, but you never said they didn't float those currencies on the market. Had they floated those things on the market, it would have been a different thing. So I gotta admit that they did do some judicious things. They were smart enough not to flood the market, and they kept the ship asail. And that was, I think they should get credit for that. But all the other things that like I say, the optics, they dancing booga, all the other things they're looking at, they're not looking at the hard economics of the
Right. Good. Welcome,
I think
Evans.
Larry wants to join. So
thank you,
I
Mr.
think
John.
Larry wants to.
Jimmy, both administrations have faced corruption allegation, right? Why was the public more vocal during the Weah tenure than Boakai, despite similar issues? And Jimmy, you addressed that question before. Like you said, President Boakai is taking some steps, unlike President Weah. Let me hear what Ever thinks.
You talking to me?
Yeah, you are Evans, right? I'm saying both administrations have faced the corruption allegations, but it appears to me that the public was more vocal during the Weah tenure than Boakai, in spite of similar issues. Jimmy earlier said because at least Boakai is changing some people. Even if he's not doing much, he's acting like he's doing something. President Weah kept everybody in place almost throughout his administration. Would that be one reason?
Yeah, I think that's a fair criticism of the Weah, administration. I think that the optics on this president's administration when it comes to accountability is more favorable because I think he's suspended people, he's fired some people, he's had investigations, he's turned people over to LSCC. So in that regards, I think this president is doing better than the previous administration. I think the one thing that gets me is that some people who were the most vociferous when it came to the criticism of President Weah, who are now working in the current administration, is telling us, for example, it's like Jumuku, when you're not inside, you don't know it. These are simple things. My mother told me a long time ago, don't get into government. It's a society. You got to do a lot of things to work in government, and you got to kind of put aside your morals. So I knew these things as a young person. So for people who are smart in their 40s and 50s to say that they didn't know that government is hard, and when they were outside criticizing, they only now know that it's hard when it got into it. I want to keep the same, fire to their feet because we know that they knew what they were doing. They knew that the drug issue wasn't something that is easy to fix. They knew that the corruption in Liberia is rife. It permeates every facet of our society, and almost anybody in government is going to have some hint, of corruption behind them. So when people was criticizing Weah from now to Judgment Day, most of the criticism was appropriate. But to now come into the new administration and then act as if those same things are not happening, and now you can't criticize the current administration because you trust the president, you love the president, that's being hypocritical. That's why some of us would call these people out. Not saying that President Weah was a better president per se, but the reality is the same problem persists under this president. And many people thought that he was more equipped. Many people thought that he was more seasoned as a politician and as an elder statesman. and would have came in and done the things that President Weah had, lacked the ability to do. And this walk about the retired suffering, not retired suffering, but retired, said no to drugs, that
And
was a great.
we'll come to the
Okay,
drugs. We'll
yeah,
come to the drugs. And so yeah, that's fair. But you talk about being hypocritical, and I have said that several times. Let's take welcome, Larry. Please do some adjustment there. We want to see you clearly. The professor can be in darkness. So one of those people is Senator Darius Dillon, right? Senator Darius Dillon was a critic of the Weah administration. Few things come to mind. He criticized the Weah administration or President Weah for flying private jets. When push came to shove, he said he apologized. When Senator Dillon was at the head of demonstrations, in fact, at some point he said he's going to take rocks. But then these days they are not saying, it's almost like protest is bad. You're going to scare away investors and all that. Jimmy, is it a natural thing that one guy from Nigeria said when it's bad manners to talk while you are eating. You guys are now eating so they can talk. And that's one thing that is dragging the country down.
Yeah, there is definitely a bias. Yeah, neither have I. Public corporations maybe, but not government. There's a bias, and you can't once you get and a politician, you got to be careful here. They talk from two sides of their mouth. They will say one thing. The same Senator Dillon, remember, he used to talk about the salaries and how he would just give his away and all of that. But you don't see him talking about it very much anymore. And to me, their salary should be proportional to the mean average salary in Liberia, but it is not. It is extraordinarily high, and to me, that's a ripoff. I think that shows where they really are. Why would you compensate yourself way above the norm, way above professionals, way above average, and yet you say the country doesn't have money, and you don't have money for schools, you don't have money for health? How can you justify your compensating yourself like that? Most responsible countries, they take that out of their hands and put up a special committee determines all of that. But you can see that we shoot. I think a lot of our problem is that we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Okay, because we're not willing to make the hard choices. Another thing we do is we turn back business people. I don't know if you know how critical that is. Business people come to Liberia, they want to do business, they want to get opportunities, but they have to grease the palms of the hand of those who stand at the gate, who stand in the doorway. If they don't, these guys see the people leaving and going back. I think that is just as terrible as those guys taking lavish salaries and denying public education and public health the resources they need. So a lot of this stuff we do our own. And when you're part of the government, it's embarrassing to criticize it when you're part of it.
Right. Yeah, true. But for instance, Senator Dillon was part of the government when he was criticizing Weah. He was still a senator. But let me bring in Professor Larry. Prof, welcome. And we are talking about the level of criticism. And I think our problem has been, when we know the guy, we like the guy, or the guy is from our district, even like the national legislators, right? We said, almost every Liberian said they are the worst. But then let one of them come, let our tribal organization invite one of them, or our county organization. I mean, we are hanging with them and we are so proud. But collectively, we condemn all of them. But the one that is closer to us, like for me, when they started talking about my man or Abdullah Kamara, my mom was not sharp like it was sharp on the other people, right?
I'm glad you confessed it.
Right. So, Prof. Larry, let's talk about the nepotism and the appointments, right? How do appointments under President Boakai compare to those under President Weah in terms of meritocracy and transparency? Remember this whole Southeastern thing? Remember that they were bringing seditions? Remember all that, right? But is the criticism as loud as it was under President Weah? Or we just think, oh, they got a footballer, so he doesn't even have sense to do anything?
Look, one of the things, and thanks so much, Dennis, for this program. And, good evening to everyone. My brother, Jimmy Eastman Morris, nice to see you guys. There was a lady and this professor named Bazerman who testified before the U.S. Congress on something they like to call motivational blindness. That is, we don't see the unethical behavior of the people that we like or that are close to us, but we're able to see all of the wrongdoings that everybody else is doing. So when you hear people within the government or within, Liberians who are partisan to whether it's the CDC or the Unity Party, when they're criticizing, they will never see the wrongdoing of the people within their party, but will always be able to criticize others, which is what you mentioned with Senator Dillon. Senator Dillon, huge critic of the CDC government. But now we see the same thing repeated with the Unity Party government. And it's like he doesn't see it at all. The only few people that I see standing up at times to say, hey, what the government is doing is wrong, would be maybe like Amara Khan. I know I've seen a couple of instances where he tried to let them know that they were doing something wrong. So it's called motivational blindness. We never see the unethical behavior of the people that we like. We will always want to criticize those that we do not like. The thing with what's happening in Liberia, and I mentioned this in our chat, after 178 years, we've seen a repeat of the same behaviors. From the second, the free slaves came from the U.S., landed over in Liberia, and they went directly into enslaving the indigenous people, the people they met there. There's the same mentality we see today. When you get in, it's like the former vice president said when she was here in Pennsylvania, it becomes your time to eat. So you're not too concerned about what's happening to the rest of the population. You always seem to be focused on what you can gain to benefit you, which is what makes it so difficult for Liberia to get out of the trap, because they're caught in a poverty trap. Every few years, there becomes a new elite that comes in. They're the ones that control the political system. Unity Party was there from 2005 until they left by 2017. They were enjoying themselves. But then here's the crazy thing, Dennis. The people who are sitting on the outside now criticizing, they were actually, some of them have put their life on pause and just waiting for 6 years to go by so they can have another opportunity to come back and do the same thing the other group is doing. That's why Liberia seems to be in this circle where nothing seems to be changing. The same people. It is so weird that you have some people who are, their main focus is to just criticize whichever government comes in place.
Yeah.
Yaka Kolobai has been doing it. He criticized Weah vehemently. He supported Boakai Unity Party. Today, what is he doing? He's vehemently criticizing Boakai. And what happens when the next person comes in? Criticizing the government itself is not a strategy, especially when you are part of the government. He doesn't realize that the government is made up of 3 branches and he's a part of the government. If you were to ask him, what policies or what laws did you put in place to create jobs in your district? He would probably get mad and start insulting you. Why? Because he cannot tell you the numbers of what he is actually doing to change the lives of the people. And when I say numbers, don't throw something at me. Give me something that is measurable so I can see that, oh, you reduced maybe poverty in your district by this amount. Don't just kind of give me something arbitrary. So that's what we're seeing, Dennis. We're seeing people criticizing because it's in their best interest to criticize the government that is there now with the hope that maybe like 5 or 6 years from now, it will be their time to come in and eat.
Yeah.
So
some people can really function in an organized environment, especially leadership, where they can be held accountable. I've seen that with a lot of talk show hosts, right? They were criticizing Weah so much, and they had everybody behind them. And supported President Boakai. Now when President Boakai won, they are not able to support the government or back the government or explain its policies. And they will lose, people because they don't know how to be held accountable and sometimes admit or improve. So they have gone back to criticism because that's the only way they can maintain their loyal fans or they can maintain fans. But Evan, let me bring you in. Let me throw 2 more names at you, right? Because we watch someone like Mr. Colley, Martin Colley, who made name for himself for criticizing. I mean, he was one of those who was the very first at the from Soup side that started criticizing President Weah. And I mean, he had a sustained level of advocacy. Then he supported President Boakai. He got rewarded with asset, he resigned. But that same level of advocacy and criticism is not at the same level. We can see that. Another person, because I worked with him, was the Soup secretary at that time, Jusu. I admire the kid because, when I see young people at the university where the university is very challenged. So when I see people that are shining in spite of the challenges, I can, take to them. Jusu now is at the Freeport. I mean, and he has forgotten everything that he was saying before. And we mentioned Dylan before, and there are a whole lot of people like that, some of whom I've interviewed. Our own man, George Lobo, there's nobody who defended President Kennedy Boakai than Lobo. He was challenging he wanted to debate almost everybody, including Finance Minister too and all that. Now, you can even have George Lobo to appear on any platform and defend the government that he supported or debate people that he, when the shoe was on the other foot, he was debating. Hypocrisy or things are better now.
Yeah. Look, Mr. John, this is why, for me personally, I like to have some degree of separation from these people. Because when you know people personally, you tend to not want to criticize as much. And I like to speak freely. I like to criticize anybody who is doing wrong. That's why I'm not even closely affiliated with the CDC people or any other political party. But let me say this. When it comes to the private jet, I actually disagree with the criticism on both presidents. I do think that the president needs a private jet. I said it during President Weah, and I will maintain that point right now, that the president does need a private jet. You can't be an advocate and connect yourself with a political party. It's almost an oxymoron to do such a thing. And that's why the likes of Martin Colley, who is very smart, brilliant, he's a good writer, does good research, and he brings information that is devastating to the current administration at the time. It was President Weah, and he's even done a little bit to this government. But I think if you are activists, like the likes of Henry Costa, who purport to be activists, and you take a side, your activism is not biased because you're aiming for one side to win and one side to lose. You're not straight down the middle. You're not just advocating for truth, and for the development of the Liberian people in general. So once you put yourself in that box, you're now a partisan. And when you become a partisan, you cannot leave your side that you chose and go to the opposite side, because really you want to be on this side. So you don't want to criticize too hard, because then it's going to ostracize you, and people are going to want to put you out of their orbit. So for me, I think we have to know who we are as a people. What's really going on in Liberia right now is, people like to say it's the flexing. If you think you're flexing now, when I get there, I'm going to flex even harder. I'm going to ride bigger cars. I'm going to do more sophisticated things than you did. I'm going to be even more, advanced in my corruption. I'm going to be even more sophisticated in my corruption than you was, because you're too stupid to know how to steal, efficiently. That's one of the things that I think the Ellen Johnson Sirleaf government was really good at. It was very efficient and very sophisticated in the looting of the country. President Weah government would say they were more blatant, and more overt in the way that they were corrupt, because probably they wasn't as sophisticated as the Ellen's government. I can criticize both parties. For me, I have a slight leaning towards President Weah. I like him, perhaps better as a person. I think he sacrificed more for the country as a human being. I think he showed more love over time. The service that he rendered to the country, in the private sector was more selfless than what President Boakai did. So these are just a little caveat that leans me more towards President Weah. Not that I have some, inherent love for him, but because looking at his past service to the country, I think he spent more of his personal money. I think he really, really sacrificed some of the most crucial things to himself for the country. And I think that has to be said, even though perhaps he's not as qualified. But when you have two choices, if you have a dichotomy, you have to make one. You have to choose one, right? So that's why you see, I say I'm a sympathizer with President Weah, but I'm not a Decent or Reaction. But when it came to those two people, I felt like he's shown more to the country. He's had more service for the country. He's given our country a better name on the international stage. So I can, in good conscience, give the country over to a man who says that he lived on loan, who hadn't done anything tangible for his people. When President Weah came into power, although people say, "Oh, it's not his money; it's the government money," he started building homes for people. He started doing things that he saw was beneficial for the Liberian people, even though his government and his cabinet mismanaged and were corrupt. But he actually wanted to do certain things that he felt was in dire need for the people. He built homes at the former airport. He built homes in some of the counties. He built football pitches, even though people think and laughed at that as not being real development. But he knew what he wanted to do, especially in terms of helping the lives of the people. And also, I don't blame President Boakai for not coming there and fixing everything in the first year. The one thing I do blame him on is that at least now maybe he's kind of rolling back a little bit, but he wanted to be a dictator. He wanted to spit in the face of our Constitution. He wanted to take the law by the neck and just kind of bully everybody. And that's my biggest criticism of him. But everything else, I just think is a symptom of us as a people in Liberia. We're corrupt inherently almost. And it seems like anybody that comes there, the people they surround themselves with, most of them are going to be corrupt. And it's the same for both presidents.
Thank you, Jimmy. And I want to go to economics, and then the economists will
we got Larry.
But let me. So they say when you cook a potato, the big one go under. So let me start with you on the economy. So inflation and donor dependency still persists under President Boakai. Why is there less public outrage now compared to Weah administration? Let me add on top of that, you started by saying, the U.S. rate and stuff like that. We also saw that President Weah came and he had what I think he borrowed that concept from Prophet Key, harmonization, because Prophet Key said he harmonized salary. He felt that let's do this, even though that harmonization affected more of the people down there than the elite. And that was heavily criticized. I think if there's one major thing that brought his government down would be harmonization. The opposition people hammered that very well. In fact, sometimes you say, our data harmonized, or we'll harmonize your vote. President Boakai has kept harmonization in place. Another thing President Weah did was something that was not well thought out at all, a free college tuition for public colleges and universities. And he was criticized, but he just did that on the fly. Didn't even think about where the money was going to come from. And he was heavily criticized. President Boakai came, and we thought on day one, he would, by the stroke of a pen, cancel that. He maintained that. And yet, he's not being criticized for free tuition. So my question is, why is there less public outrage about these things? compared to the Weah administration?
So you see, the problem is Weah and his group, they love to brag. They talk a lot about things sometimes they don't even know a whole lot about. They love to be in the news. They go on shows with their little charts and stuff and discuss things that they shouldn't be talking about. President Boakai is doing some of the same things because when Weah came in, he entered the IMF ECF program, extended credit facility program, which forced Weah to go into the whole harmonization thing. They didn't do a good job explaining what that meant. The ECF is a bad program. I'm not a big fan of it. It's a bad program because it's like a payday loan, right? It ties poor countries into this thing where you can't G nor haul. You can't do anything without the IMF giving you the okay to do it. We hadn't talked a whole lot about it. They didn't know how to explain it to the people, and they got in trouble for that. President Boakai came in. He also entered the ECF program, but nobody really focused on that because either they didn't talk about it a whole lot. So they're doing the same thing, except Weah, Twet, and the rest of his people, they talk too much. They talk too much about it, right?
But Larry, don't you think it's because that we just say Weah is incompetent, and when it comes to President Boakai, we say he knows what he's doing. So even when he's leading us in the deep sea, we say this is experience guy, 42 years. So let's move along, right?
Yeah, but right. But the problem is the LRDs has fallen to one of the lowest rates that it has been in years, right? And the reason being, similar to Weah, when Weah came in and they did that whole fiasco with the missing 15, 17 billion, whatever the case may be, we know that the Liberian dollars fell because that money ended up in the economy. There's this thing called the economic theory of money, right? The more money you put into the economy, it was going to devalue the currency is going to fall and prices will go up.
And let me remember my econ, the Keynesian liquidity
Econ
trap.
101.
Yeah, the Keynesian liquidity trap. The excess money supply get trapped in there.
Exactly. And it caused the Liberian dollars to fall. It fell tremendously because they had that money in the economy. President Boakai, if you pay attention to the LRDs, it has been falling. It has been falling. A lot of people are not paying attention to it. But when the LRD loses value, if let's say you're paying something today, maybe about 170 or 175 LRDs, if that thing goes to about 200 LRDs, the thing you're buying today becomes more expensive. That's considered a tax on the poor people because the poor people spend most of the money buying foods and the bare necessities to survive. Food, gasoline, medical expenses. They don't use that money to go to Calabash or go to Boulevard Palace to go have lunch. No, they use it for essential items. So when the LRD is falling, that's a tax on the poor people. But let me say, I think, Maurice, you also mentioned that I think you believe that it was okay for the president to fly a private jet. Is that correct? That's a bad idea for one of the poorest country in the ECOWAS region. It's a bad idea. And I'm saying this because I actually looked into it like about a year or so ago, or even longer than that when I started doing it. The actual cost to fly a private jet with maybe about 8 to 10 people sitting in there is between $8,000 to $10,000 an hour for one of the poorest countries. And because I looked at the tag on one of the planes that Weah was renting, the airport, the company is not far from me, from where I stay. When I did the math on it, it turns out they were spending about $3 to $4 million. If they were flying in a monthly basis now, $3 to $4 million, it's extremely expensive when he flew private jet to go to the World Cup. Mm-hmm. That was ridiculous. It was not even necessary. So if they were giving private jets and they're using it for things like that, like taking a private jet to fly over to, there was a conference in Paris, I think it was some women's conference in Paris, where a lot of, like the Mexican president, Obrador at the time, he did the conference through a Zoom. President Weah then flew to Paris to go sit in a hotel room to use Zoom for the same conference, flying a private jet. It was absolutely ridiculous for one of the poorest countries in ECOWAS You can't do that. It makes no sense. Mexico, that has a much larger GDP. The president came in, boom, he got rid of the private jet. He said there was no need for him to be flying a private jet when so many people were poor in that country. Liberia is not wealthy enough for the president to be flying private jet. It is just way too expensive. Flying first class commercial makes a lot more sense. You don't need a private jet because to be flying with 8, 10, 12 people or so in a private jet, it becomes extremely expensive. But here's the thing, back to what Dennis was asking in terms of, why President Weah did some of these things. Then President Boakai is doing it, but it's not, people not paying attention to it. People not paying attention to it because I don't know if it's just people are just tired, or people, like you said, maybe the bar, President Weah set the bar so low that anything President Boakai is doing now is considered, 42 plus years of experience. But essentially, this is what's happening. President Boakai is going to catch a lot of trouble. He's going to get into a lot of economic troubles for several reasons. Number one, they're borrowing a lot of money. If you're borrowing money and you're putting it especially to recurrent expenditures, you're putting a lot of that money into your, to expenses that do not create economic growth or economic activity. When it comes time for you to make those payments, you're going to fall into a lot of trouble. And if you miss your debt payment with the IMF or the World Bank or anyone else you're borrowing from, they will automatically freeze the special drawing rights. You're done. So you can't keep increasing your debt because the IMF reported that Liberia is at a moderate risk of debt default. We're getting there. The other thing is, every president that comes in Liberia, well, let me say, starting from 2005 when Ellen came in, within 3 to 4 years, something dramatic happens in the administration that sets the country back economically. When Ellen came in, by 2007, a major investment bank in the US called Lehman Brothers, they failed. When Lehman Brothers failed, it was followed by Bear Stearns. Bear Stearns collapsed. That led to the economic crisis that spanned the globe. It impacted Liberia because they said when the American financial system catches, or when the American financial system sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. So Liberia suffered. Fast forward, after we got out of the financial crisis, like in 2011 or so, President Obama did a great job. He came out with, the America's Promise grants. He came out with programs to help restart the American economy. It worked. But by the time Liberia came out, because we're so caught up in the extractive sectors, we're a rentier nation. We rent our iron ore. We rent our fisheries. We rent everything in the country is renting. By December of 2013, Ellen was faced in her second term after she won the election. Second term, she was hit with another crisis. What was it? By December, a young Peking in Guinea, in December of 2013, came down with a disease they haven't seen before. It was called Ebola. All of the major investors fled the country. The economy collapsed again. By the time Liberia came out of Ebola in 2016 or so, when they finally declared Ebola free, 2015, 16. By that time, the election came by, George Weah won. George Weah, when he started off pretty bad, they started off with a whole missing billion fiasco that caused the Liberian dollars to fall. But by March of 2020, Liberia was hit with COVID. The world took a pause back and everything slowed down again. So even after President Boakai, he comes in, what happens? The demise of USAID. USAID was pumping billions. Look, between 2013 to 2016, USAID pumped in 1.3 billion in the healthcare sector in Liberia. From 2005 to 2025, the American government pumped in about 1.5 billion to Liberia. But even despite all of the money they pumped into Liberia, a young girl died in Grand Cru still cannot read a fitting sentence. Why? Because the illiteracy rate is a little over 51% in the country. Okay. So it is an absolute mess. Liberia goes in this cycle. We're caught in the poverty trap, and we got to find a way to free ourselves.
Thank you. Jimmy, you want to talk on the economy too, or you want to get somewhere?
I would like to just to talk about why people find it difficult to criticize groups that they belong to. One of the reasons, they call it identity protection. Sometimes, criticizing the group can feel like you're criticizing yourself. So it sort of triggers a defensive reflex. That is why some sport fans, political party member, or religious adherents can excuse bad behavior from their side that they condemn in others. Then another reason is fear of social costs. Speaking up risk rejection, ridicule, and being labeled disloyal. And especially like our community, like Liberia, a close-knit community like that, this can lead to real consequences. People can start ostracizing you. And then there's this aspect of loyalty versus integrity dilemma. Most groups implicitly reward loyalty over dissent. So even though you want to tell the truth, but you be more loyal than criticizing, they will reward you for it. And so that's another reason why you don't see them criticizing. And then, of course, there's this cognitive dissonance. Sometimes when we believe something is wrong, it clashes with our belief that we're the good guys. So you can't adjust to admitting that you're wrong, And then there's also a cultural conditioning. But so what you do, if you're going to be a critic, you risk being ostracized and condemned and labeled. And you might even, you might lose your friends, you might lose your connections. We want to tell the truth and, integrity, but when you're part of a group, it's harder to do it. Like we can do it. We sitting down here, our job not depending on it. Nobody.
And that group, Jimmy, doesn't necessarily have to be being part of government. It also being part of an ethnic group or a county.
Yes, also group. You have to value truth over tribe. You see, a lot of people, just because they're a tribesman, they don't want to say anything. But no, integrity is supposed to be our main objective, and we're not there. And that is that vicious circle that Lara was explaining just now. That is one of the reasons we're in it, because we don't. When something wrong, we don't say it's wrong, and we find ourselves back to where we were before. We never getting out of the hole. We have to be honest with ourselves if we're going to get.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us, this is Friday Night Debate. We are kind of taking a little mellow tune here to just look at the problem. We are looking at the level of criticism against the Weah administration. Compare that to the level of criticism against the Boakai administration. Both sometimes doing the same thing, but one criticism was louder than the other. And we are trying to see why, why people will behave the way they do. And I think we are getting somewhere. And we will get there. That's why I have some pictures here to go along with it. You see how they are, one criticism shining more than the other. One is bigger, right? And so if we weigh them and we'll go. One of those areas is drugs, right? Remember those pictures with those guys that are hitting their head on the iron pole, the zombies like this, and all that during the Weah administration. And I think that's Evans's sweet spot, right? The drug issue. I mean, in fact, President Weah himself was accused of taking drugs. Now, that number, I think it has gotten worse. I interviewed a former DEA guy or Fariga, and even when he started to describe the problem, I also interviewed Coffee with Jojo and Caleb that work in that area. They said, look, Dennis, with the number of people on drugs, the young people, if the number is so high, meaning they will vote for one of them serve as president. So we are not far from having, maybe we are Zogo legislator already. We're not far from having a Zogo president because people vote their own kind. So, Mr. Morris, how do you look at the level of criticism on this drug issue when it comes to these two administrations? And let me say it this way. Why when it comes to drug under President Boakai, has he taken, more concrete steps to address the drug crisis differently than we are? Is that why?
Thank you, Mr. John. And to your point, Professor Larry, I agree with you actually that economically it doesn't make sense. But from my perspective, I think it's more security minded that we don't
Mhm.
have control of our president's security when he's on a commercial flight. So I think that's why I'm in favor of it. Perhaps we're not there economically to have one, but overall, I think my bigger picture is, security wise, the president should be
So,
in a
so when you
secure,
say security, like they hijacked the plane somewhere.
hijack. Somebody can just walk from business class and go where our president is. I don't know if we can have bodyguards and tell the plane people nobody is allowed to come in this section. The president is here. I don't know how it works, but that was my thought process. You're right. Economically, I would do.
We got some presidents doing that, though. But go ahead.
Okay. All right. So yeah, when it comes to the drug criticism, actually, I'll give President Boyka more credit because I think the optics of what's going on under his administration seems to be more effective. Under President Weah, I can't remember the last time where we had a major bust, drug bust, and it was a big deal in the country where people were actually arrested and paraded. I don't think he did that much. So a lot of people felt like he was complicit and probably complicit within the drug, what was going on in the drug, situation in the country, and they implicated him, in that he must be somebody who is aware of what's going on and might be even his hands is in it because he don't, his government don't seem to be doing anything concrete to fight the drug problem that was in the country. But when it comes to the drug war like we have in the United States, that's been going on since the 70s or the 80s or maybe even longer, the war on drug is still going on. Many people think America has lost the war on drug. And I tell people with all the sophistication of this country, the port, the San Francisco port, which is one of the largest ports in this country, there are drugs that get smuggled through that port every day. With all of its technology and sophistication, the border with Mexico, all of the sophistication and money that they throw down to that Rio Grande River, down in Texas in that region, there's still drug that's being passed through the borders of the United States. So fighting drug is not something that one president is going to come and you stop it. Unless you want to take a Duterte, the former president of the Philippines, and you start executing people out of Saudi Arabia and some other Muslim countries, where they execute you when they find you with drugs, then maybe that may be a deterrent. But when the country is infested with drugs, it's so difficult to fight it. You have to have money, a lot of money, put aside to fight drugs. And I think one of the things I would say, this is just my own thought process. I think with President Weah, people tended to blatantly disrespect him more because most people feel like personally they were more educated than him. They could speak better than him. They feel like he was beneath them intellectually. So I think a lot of people felt like they could disrespect him more openly, even though, again, I think that the commenter is saying here that I think he sacrificed more for the country. No offense to President Boy.
Do you think because, as they say, if you cook yourself in a butter cup, they will dish you out with bamboo stick? You think that's why?
That may be. But in all honesty, I don't think President Weah has even exposed himself to the level that most people, ascribe to him, that he was somebody who was, so incompetent and should have never been president. Look, the former president of Pakistan, the cricket player who won that election in such a large nation, a nuclear-powered nation, what happened to him? He got overthrown by a military guy. He's rotting in prison right now. So people who are loved by their people for what they did, whether it's through sports or any other arenas, they can become president, whether or not you agree with them or not. The smartest people in this country don't become president. Many people will say the likes of Bill Gates and some of the geniuses that we have in this country who are really intelligent, they don't become president because they're not popular. So sometimes being a president doesn't mean that you're the most, the president who is most qualified. So, but lastly, before I close, let me say this. On the issue of the drug, I think President Boyka is doing more. In all honesty, in all fairness, I think he's doing more. He's allocated grabs more resources to it. The people that's working on the drug enforcement team has done more in terms of busting people and parading them. I think that the fact that the president took the drug test, he showed more attention. He's paying more attention to what's going on the drug issue. But it's almost an impossible war to win. It has to do with the other issues that's beyond the drug. The social economic issues has to be fixed. People have to see a alternative pathway, and that might lead into economic prosperity rather than going down the drug path. It's personal for me. I've just lost my nephew, earlier this year. 19 years old, was a drug addict. My sister hid it from me. And I didn't know about it until it was too late. I had a close friend who came from a very great family, from Conga Town. His father told me that he's not a Zobo, and I shouldn't even get in contact with him because, So it's heartbreaking. And all of these things, you can't blame a president for it. You have to blame the society. I mean, you can blame a president, but the society itself, because under Joe Boakai, under Donald Trump, we have a drug issue in this country. Under Obama, we had the pills epidemic. We have fentanyl in this country on a successive president. They're not the one that's making the fentanyl coming to the United States. They're not the one that's putting kids on drugs, but it's happening. So for people to take that criticism directly to the president, that he was the one bringing drug into the country, I thought that was unfair. He didn't do enough to fight it, yes, but to say that he was bringing drug and that he was complicit in the drug infestation of Liberia, I thought that was truly unfair. They're not saying that for Joe Boakai now. And you can argue that things are arguably worse in terms of how much drug is getting into the country and how many kids are being hooked on it.
Right. And in all fairness, we did not really see anything that the president did, publicly to tell us that he didn't like the whole drug issue, right? So I think from the beginning, when Jimmy was saying, is the narrative, how do you control it? It's public relations, right? I spoke, you see that under President Boakai, Senator Dillon has turned his Class Reloaded platform to, so they say, well, we're going to counter the narrative. We all criticize them to say this is wrong. You can't just, do this. You are government officials. In fact, instead of Senator Dillon calling these guys to the Senate to question them, he's doing that on closing argument. That's their way. Under President Weah, who are the people that President Weah was using? Mainly, his main surrogate was who? Kem Hassan. So what do you expect? But let's take a short break for 30 seconds, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the anti-drug initiative.
You can see the development improvement here. And this is what bus is having with Facebook. And the bus is having all this recommendation. This is the thing to do. All corruption go. There's no way around the Environmental Protection Agency, and I can say that for fact.
Go, corruption, go.
I truly, that's one of the people I really admire in that country. Every time I see him, I really feel good about Liberia. I really admire Councilor Gongo, honestly.
You think, Larry, you think corruption is going faster under President Boakai, President Weah?
The thing with corruption, drugs, no one is collecting actual data that can tell us that corruption is reducing. Because if you can tell me the last time a high-level government official was prosecuted, that would say you have a good case. Because people rarely get prosecuted for stealing. You can have somebody on a recording making plans and arrangement of how they're going to steal and how they have stolen, but yet they don't get prosecuted. So I think what it boils down to in Liberia is just the perception. It all depends on how well or what we are seeing on social media. Because check this out. If you have people who are putting videos up on a weekly basis, showing people who have been afflicted with drugs, if they're showing people who are, this zombie thing, who are highly addicted, If you show them every week, it would give the impression that you have a massive drug problem across all of the country. It's all perception because no one has the data to show how many people in the country are addicted to drugs. You have a porous border. You don't have the number of immigration stations. You don't have the number of immigration officers to manage all of the different ports of entry into the country. So drugs can freely flow into the country because you don't manage it as well as they do in other countries. So what we're seeing when we say, okay, what is the flavor of this week? What is the topic of this week? Maybe we have seen all of these videos of people that are being drug addicted, to drug addicts and stuff. So that it gives the impression, oh man, we have massive drug problem, but we really don't know for a fact. Same thing with corruption. Is corruption, is the current administration fighting corruption? Are they prosecuting people? Are people making restitution? How is the asset recovery thing going in terms of restituting money that was stolen? None of those things that we have data to. We have nothing to support it. So what I think it boils down to, Dennis, Jimmy, is what I think your earlier question is. It's the impression that we see on social media, the repeated videos, the conversations we see on the various platforms that give the impression of whether something is bad or whether something is getting better. The administration doesn't do a very good job in terms of the managing the media. They don't do a very good job in explaining themselves and managing the media. But I think this administration has done better than the previous administration because the administration was terrible at it. They didn't have real good media people. So I think this administration has done a little bit better. But the bottom line is we really don't know how well the country is doing in fighting drugs, in fighting corruption, in fighting crime, because we don't collect that level of granular details. Like what Maurice was just saying, I think it was today that President Trump issued a directive to not bring in the U.S. military to go and fight the cartel. Remember, he declared the cartel terrorist organizations, the Mexican cartel. He called it Tren de la Guardia, something they got the name. And he called them terrorist organization, and he's bringing the military. Ronald Reagan, Nancy Reagan, they take this war on drugs. We saw it. What's his name? Clinton come in with his war on drugs. Obama, they all had this whole war on drugs, but it hasn't gone away. But what other countries have done successfully, like the Icelandic countries, the Iceland and Norway, all of those countries, they have put money into treatment. They have built a culture where people now understand the dangers of drugs and don't get hooked on it. We are being reactive. We're not looking at it, okay, why did this person get on drug? Is the result of a lack of employment? Is it some mental issue? Is it something that goes back from the Civil War? We don't deal with it proactively from the front end. We wait until people get on drugs. Then we say we're going to pump money into fixing the problem. We got to go from the front end. You got to be more proactive than reactive. So it's about perception, Dennis. I think right now it's called what's the flavor of the week on social media, that people determine whether something is getting better or is getting worse.
Thank you. Matt Clarence is saying, hey, CDC had a strong drug laws and all that. Why are you guys not talking about it and all that? But Jimmy, let me come to you. President Boakai now had this action plan. And, the timing of that action plan is just suspect to me. But let me ask you, in your assessment, this 10-point plan, do these measures represent a comprehensive strategy, or are there gaps? Do you think this is a result of a comprehensive, or study on what the issues are that they are trying to address? It looked like they just came up with it, on the eve of this whole say no to drugs, and that's why I think they don't go far enough. But I want to hear what you say.
One criticism I've heard of this administration is that they do not bring in an expert to do certain things. For such a program, you need somebody who has dealt in drugs administration, know how the rehabilitation of people. They understand the whole 9 yards about this. You can't just come up with a 10-point plan. No, so of course that plan is lacking. There are many things lacking, but why get somebody to do a job who's not an expert in the area? You have to get an expert. So if the drug thing, just what Morris was saying, it requires serious resources and serious attention. You can't have just anybody just come up with a plan. It has to be a person and with the meager resources we have, we need somebody who knows how to do that on a underdeveloped country budget. What have they done? They need a study. People study these things for years and before they understand how to deal with it. We can't take it for granted. I think it's a good effort, but if it's going to work, we will have to do a more comprehensive study on it. A lot of our youth are idle. When you got nothing to do, you feel this, when you feel there's no hope, no opportunities for you. Some people they graduate from college and still no jobs. So that's just frustrating. So how do you deal with that? I think the churches can get involved, but like I said, it has to be a serious national effort and led by somebody who has expertise in this area. And we can at least try, because our youth are the future of Liberia. Yeah. And if you're not preparing them properly, I think Liberia will be taken over, because we're not preparing our youth to be leaders tomorrow. It's a serious thing that's going on, and we shouldn't take it for a joke.
Thank you. And Larry, I'll ask you the same question. I'll add a little more, right? Is there evidence that the anti-drug plan was shaped by a comprehensive study or data-driven analysis of the drug crisis in Liberia? If not, what risk does a lack of research pose to policy effectiveness? And I'll give you two more examples, because I don't think most of our things are the result of that research effort. I saw the Minister of Education breaking ground for, I think, a dormitory at BWI, for TVET program. I also saw that there's a program to build 100 schools across the country. That tells me that our issue here is school building. Because if you're building school to solve the crisis, meaning the sector things that we are facing because we don't have school buildings. So the same way I saw it. So talk to me about whether you think this is data driven.
No, what they're doing in our country is not data driven. And I spend an awful lot of time here with a lot of people around the world. And all we do is we look at data. We set up databases. We use things like ClickSense, Power BI, Tableau to actually analyze data. We run a lot of statistical model. Lists that's supposed to be properly funded to collect this data with the statisticians that they have to be able to synthesize this data so we can make decisions based on data, because they said information is the basis for decision making. You can't make a decision unless you have the actual data. And it goes to show this whole thing about building schools, that's not the underlying issue in Liberia. You currently have schools, but they're not well taken off. We don't have a reading culture. We're building schools, but we're not creating a culture where people are involved in reading and education. You're building schools, but the ratio of qualified teachers to the number of students is extremely low. You're building schools, but you don't have the resources in terms of libraries and books to actually help educate the children. You're building schools, but a lot of the schools do not have steady electricity to keep the classroom lit. So we don't do things in Liberia based on data. And we know, me coming from a financial sector background, with a data science background, we don't do anything without the data. Because I need to be able to go back. And I know right now people are criticizing the US because when the Bureau of Labor Statistics boss put out the numbers that the unemployment numbers have fallen, President Trump didn't like the numbers and he fired the boss. Exactly. Which is scary because the rest of the world is saying, now, oh, wait a second, is the US only going to put out numbers that the president likes? That's a problem right there, right? So you have to make decisions based on data. So what we need in Liberia is we need some data warehouses. I don't know if we have any true data warehouse. I know we don't have people going around collecting data and cataloging it. We have to collect the data. Because here's the thing, and a lot of the numbers, when I give these numbers, are all based on the World Bank. The World Bank has one of the largest databases, but it is all based on a lot of assumptions the World Bank is making. A ton of assumptions is being made. Because I know even the CBL doesn't collect the type of data they need to make the monetary policies that they keep putting out there. But I probably would shut down the CBL and put in some qualified people based on meritocracy, because I think the CBL is just a joke right now. But let's not get off the tangent. So you have to, I would get a ton of Liberians and train them in data science. I would let's just put a lot of statisticians in there to give us the numbers, because I want to know the number of people who are afflicted with drugs. I want to understand why they got onto drugs in the first place. But none of this stuff happens if you don't have money. You can't pay for this stuff. You cannot borrow your way into development if you're not using the money you're borrowing and putting it into economic growth. We borrow the money and we use it for recurrent expenditures. These guys are living high off the horse. You have people over there in the legislature who are making more money than legislator in New York City, the largest city out here in the US, one of the largest in the US. They're making more money than them with all of the benefits.
Exactly.
You can't do it. And that was the reason why the IMF, when we had to enter the ECF program, the IMF said, look, you have to do the harmonization because this is not sustainable. Same thing when Boakai entered the ECF program, even less than when, it took, we had about a year, maybe almost a year and a half to 2 to enter the ECF program. It took President Boakai less than that to enter the ECF program. And it told him the same thing. But to your point, Dennis, everything has to be data driven. Any leader who is coming to that country, anybody interested in running for president or taking that country from the poverty trap it's in, you have to invest in a database. You have to bring in data analysts, database admins, and you'll build lists and then be able to make informed decisions. Because I'm telling you, man, Liberia, I don't want to say Liberia is going to end up like Haiti, one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere. But there's no way you can have a population growing at over 2% a year, maybe 100,000 babies per year. You're not creating jobs at twice the rate, and you think that it's sustainable. That is why when what he named Jonas Savimbi said years ago, all he needed was $10,000 to take over any country in Africa, it rang true because the number of young people unemployed is so high. Madame Sirleaf said it during her trip to Europe. She said the number of young people unemployed in Liberia is a risk to national security. That's why you can see legislators paying a few dollars to get people to run into the street and protest left and right. The unemployment rate is just high. Too many people are unemployed.
Evans, let's talk about the day of the Say No to Drugs, right? So mainly women came together with Coffee with Jojo, Mariah Yakula, and other women, wanted to do this. And the Senate joined. Inside, they start printing T-shirts. People at the executive mansion, everybody, right? They started joining. So the people that are supposed to receive the petition and do something about it. So how should the public interpret the government officials, including those responsible for policy making, joining the march and receiving the petition? Does it reflect accountability, or they are distancing themselves from responsibility? They said Tubman used to do that, Jimmy, if you remember. They went to demonstrate against Tubman. They are demonstrating. Yeah, by the time you look, Tubman too he got all the palm branches around himself. They said, come and they went to the president, the mansion, to receive the petition. The man came from Moderator to receive it. Everybody was shocked. He said, well, the same reason you demonstrating are the same reason I demonstrate.
Well, let me say this, Mr. John. I think that the legislators are. I think the president have to make a play here, and he has to publicize it. And what he has to do is to ask the legislators to sacrifice part of their pay so that he can use that money to fight drugs. And fighting drugs now maybe not
It's not legislators alone. Ministers are making the same money.
ministers and people in his
Yeah.
government. And then let's hear them say no, where their sons, their nephews, their daughters are dying from drugs. Let them say no. They don't want to take a pay cut. I said, this president, he can do so many things, especially when it came to this cutting of aid. He could have used that to ask for a pay cut. There's a lot of ways you can ask for a pay cut and hamstring these guys to a position that is untenable if they say no, because the public will be watching them to see that if you telling me you can't take a $5,000 pay cut so that young boys and girls can live, they can stay off drugs, and we can have more resources to put in the border patrol. That's what I think it is, Mr. Job. I think the biggest issue is not just that the drugs is, the society is turning to drugs, but that our borders are so porous. People from Ghana can leave and go into Guinea and come back in the afternoon. That's how easy it is to just cross borders. You telling me a guy with a drone who's sophisticated can't take a drone and drop drugs in a low forest area and somebody go pick it up? Do we even have an airspace that people are monitoring? So it's just we lack the ability to secure our country, whether it's through the land or through the air, even through the sea. I don't even know how our coast guards are functioning in the country. So taking more money and more resources and strengthening and boosting those places, especially the border and the sea coast and the seaports, I think that would do a lot in terms of bringing down the importation of drugs in the country. But I think the president has to make a play here. He has to use it and really try to put a budget out that's going to be reflective of what he's trying to do on this drug fight, and tell the legislature that in order for me to do this, I need you guys to take a pay cut. It has to happen. They can't say no to it. If they say no to it, in my mind, it's like telling them, like, when people, my pay is more important than saving the lives of your children. The president has to use that political tool to get these guys to take a pay cut for one, also to get more resources. This has to outsmart them in that.
Dennis, can I ask Mr. Morris a quick question?
Sure.
Yeah. So, Mr. Morris, do you think that the people who are benefiting from such a corrupt system, like the legislators, the system is rigged? We know that the pay is astronomical. I mean, when you look at, compared to civil servants pay $100, $150 a month compared to the thousands they're making, do you think people who are benefiting from that system will be willing to change the system by changing their pay? Do you think that's going to happen?
No, I don't think they're going to do it willingly, right? And that's what I'm saying. The president should use the public, right? And to put a budget that if they refuse
Mr.
it,
Morris, the president is benefiting too. We're just talking about private jets. We're talking
That is
about
right. Yeah.
right.
What sacrifices the president they're making with bulletproof cars, private jets, and the
but he's in a special position.
Allowance.
He's in a special position, right? And that's what I'm saying. If you have hundreds of people who are lawmakers who are taking a $5,000 a month pay cut, and that's millions of dollars that you can divert to fighting drugs. And that's why I think that if you put that out there, if they come together and say no, we're not doing it, then the Liberian people will turn against it. And I think it'll be almost a political suicide to say no, we can take a pay cut of $2,000 or $3,000 a month.
Do you know how
that money to fight drugs?
Do you know how this came about? President Sharif allowed them to do their own salary because she herself would take her own. The story is told of some guys that were eating grape with a blind man. So the rule of the game was they should take one grape at a time. So they were taking it one grape, and then the guy was blind now. He started taking 2, nobody talked. He started taking 3, nobody talked. Up to 5, nobody talked. He grabbed the hands of those guys and said, "You're cheating me." I was blind when I'm taking 5 and nobody is talking. It means you're taking 10. So you can say, you take less money, let me take more, right? So
the president tried to do that. In all fairness, he tried to do something. I think about cutting his salary. Maybe he thought it was a formative thing that he's doing. But I think that has to be the president's focus. He still has a lot of years left in his presidency. I think he has to bring, innovative ways to try to cut the legislature salary, and even his salary and his minister's salary, and using this drug, as one of the reasons why they should cut the salary. I don't think they will say no to it. The country is in dire straits. A lot of things are happening that require more resources. We can't raise enough money fast enough. The only thing we can do is to cut salaries. Who would say no to that in their right mind?
Yeah. And if you come to look at it, sometimes the salary we look at, sometimes they are just little compared to other money being stolen. Look at Nokal. What do? They get all the money. LPRC, now they say, okay, we'll import our own gas. Look at the HPX. During the President Weah administration, they said they were even taking the money in advance. And all that.
The system is rigged. The system is rigged. But Dennis, remember what President Biden said one time? And I think this goes to what Clarence Pearson is saying in the chat. President Biden said, don't tell me what you're going to do. Show me your budget, and I will tell you what you're going to do. It starts with the budget. And I think what Mr. Pearson is saying in here holds true. These guys have increased their budget for this current fiscal year. And a lot of that money has gone away. Has it gone into some sort of an economic development? No. They've increased their office. Look at the speaker. Look at, and this is why they're fighting. They were fighting for the speakership. It's because of the amount of money that goes into the budget. So, and the crazy thing about it, I know you have to go to Jimmy real quick. The crazy thing about it, they're going to end up with a massive budget shortfall because we know now the Federal Reserve Bank, we know that the IMF, the World Bank has told them, you can't do deficit financing. You can't be borrowing money from the central bank to close your budget shortfall. They're going to end up with a budget shortfall because they weren't expecting Trump, which I find kind of silly, to shut down USAID. They were factoring in grants and a whole bunch of stuff. They should have known because in 2017, when Trump came in, he tried to cut USAID budget by 30%. So they should have seen it coming, but this whole thing, I think Mr. Pearson said it best, Take a look at the budget. Joe Biden said, don't tell me what you're going to do. Let me see it in your budget. The budget shows that there is really no incentive for them to change this rigged system. So we are where we find ourselves.
Thank you. One thing we didn't mention, and just bringing it up, I'm going to go to Jimmy and still on drug, is one thing we're accusing President Weah of. Do you know it? Boakai dancing. Have you seen President Boakai dance too? It's just funny, But Jimmy, let me ask you on the petition, right? The petition presented at the march, it lamented social devastation of drugs and call for decisive action on the part of the government. How should the government and the legislature in particular respond to ensure public demands are not simply acknowledged, but acted upon? Well, what should they do now?
Well, we've just been talking about the budget, okay? And that means you got to spend money. You got to spend money on drug enforcement. You have to spend money on rehabilitation. They've tried this just say no. I heard this thing going around. They tried that during Nancy Reagan administration. Just say no. You can't just say no. It's an illness. So what you have to do now is spend money to rehabilitate those people. They can't just say no. You have to help them. It's not throwing them in jail will not do that. Maybe throwing the dealers in jail might slow down the drug, trafficking. But throwing victims, people who are drug users, that doesn't help. It's an illness. So you got to spend money. You got to put the money somewhere. So I'm not sure all this fanfare where it's going to lead. But it's just what Larry was talking about. I will know by how much resources you put behind it. I will know immediately if it's going to work or not work.
And what you do to the people you catch?
The ones dealing or the ones using?
Traffickers, dealers.
Oh, well, you can put some severe punishments on them.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something I noticed that goes on in the other day. They got a tip. The U.S. Embassy, I understand, to get them a tip that there was going to be some drug people bringing drugs through the country, and they caught the drugs red-handed. They took the people to jail. I think they were from some foreign nationals,
Right.
and they walked out of that courtroom and gone and free. So there's
And what happened to that 100 million
nobody
worth of drugs?
knows. Nobody knows. So that's the racketeering that's going on in our place. I mean, it's the norm, and it's gonna break. You keep on bending it. It's gonna break. The economy. I mean, especially with these things that go on, we're not moving. But we will see. But if they're still doing a budget like they did, the one they drafted, and now that they know they're not getting aid, it's going to be a challenging few years to come. We're going to see if the people are really ready to work, because now they're not getting that free money. They're going to have to come up with some ways to meet the budget shortfall, and pay people salaries. When you stop paying people, it's going to be something else. So I think we got some good times, good ways to go, but it's going to be an interesting next 4 years. I can tell you that.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just watching us and want to be part of the conversation, 605-313-6004 is the number to call. The code is 791-403#. Let me also announce that next week, Tuesday, the president honored some people recently, and one of those honor is Emmanuel Sonnyboy Weah. Sonnyboy wants to tell his story we invited him to tell his story on his journey to national recognition. His work has the dual citizenship czar, that's how I call him. And now even his name was in the national oration. So Tuesday, Emmanuel Weah will be here to tell his story. And you don't want to miss that. He'll be interviewed by the best in the business. Tune in. Evans, drawing on comparison, right, between past and current administrations' response to the drug crisis, what lessons should be learned about leadership, public trust, and the effectiveness of government interventions? That's a later question.
I mean, that's a big question.
Yeah.
I think that one of the tools that we have in Liberia that we don't utilize enough is the media. It's the media. And even though some of these guys are critical of the government in power, sometimes you have to have a media campaign where you can reach out to these podcasters and people who have talk shows and pay them, not for political coverage, but for national campaigns. Like if you have a jingle on this show, for example, when we have in our prime time, the government can sponsor a 30-second campaign for say no to drug, whether it's a jingle or some little message, and everybody will have that campaign playing on international, stage, or even in Liberia on the local level. Have a national campaign against drugs. Put money into it. Go to the biggest platform. Go to the biggest spots that people gather. Have posters and things like that that's going to let people know what's going on, and that this is a national campaign and we're all fighting against it. Whether you're in position or in opposition, you have to bring people together through a national campaign and use the resources of the government and the media apparatus to spread the word so that people know what's going on and that you're serious about this and that this is a national effort and you need everybody on board. So I think that's one of the tools that the government can use. Is to really try to, spread the word nationally so that people now will take upon themselves, if they can do any little thing in their own little town or villages to try to help fight against drugs, that the government will be supporting you. And then you recognize people. You go across the country, you give people props who have been helping to fight drug in their own community and been effective at it. So I just think doing national project is something that we don't see quite as much in Liberia, where the president would get behind something and he would bring the entire country along with him, and everybody else can governize around the government and the president, and really try to fight for something that's going to be a beneficial for the national growth of our country. So I think using the media is one way that the president can do this to spread the word and to show that he has intent, and then follow that with a budgetary allotment specifically for fighting against drugs. Yes, building school, like Professor Larry was saying, Professor Kennedy was saying, is great. But if you don't have the students to go there and sit to learn, and they're hooked on drugs, it's pointless. So telling the country and giving a poignant message that this is about our youth, this is about the future of Liberia, and coming with a campaign that's going to tell people that these are your kids, these are your future presidents, your future representatives. If we don't take care of them now, we'll be in a worse position than before. And really spreading that message to everybody and getting everybody behind you, I think that would be most effective in maybe localizing the fight against drugs in Liberia.
Thank you. Gentlemen, we've spoken about the level of criticism against the past and the current administration, and then we talk about the drug initiative. It's time to conclude, and I always like to conclude, kind of looking forward. Somebody told me, say, then there's just too much criticism. What can we do? What is the way forward? Is it lost? And even though for the time being it appears that I lost the superintendent's seat, but all is not lost. Somebody told me, right? So how do we move forward on all these things? I mean, we saw people that were criticizing. I mean, especially during that demonstration, right? I saw people in UP, people that were part of the June 7th, saying, no, this is wrong. In fact, go get permit. And in fact, don't get it. And where does this come from? Like the Nigerian writer said, is that those who were once in the rain, they have come in the house now, put on dry clothes. They are more reluctant to go back in the rain than the people who have never been there. Mm-hmm. This is serious. Let's conclude, Prof.
Dennis always have these small sayings. I don't know why he need to write a book about the all small sayings that Dennis have. He need to write a book about it, but man, some of these things that will crack me up, but it's brilliant, they touch on the point. Look, it's been a great conversation. I will conclude on two things. For countries who have been sort of successful on dealing with the drug crisis, there wasn't one silver bullet. There wasn't one solution across the board. They came in multiple ways. They first tried to understand the underlying issue, like why did certain people get on drugs? After understanding that, they went through a whole process of educating people about, what happens when you get on drugs, right? How it impacts your family, how it impacts your life, how it can lead to an early grave. They also invested heavily in treatment, something we don't do. How many treatment centers do we have? How many people are able to quickly access the treatment centers? We don't do that. They put money into it. They also have the enforcement aspect of it, meaning you have to be able to stop the illicit flow of drugs. You have to stop the flow of illicit drugs into your country. They did multiple things, but mainly it was centered around first declaring that drug was an illness. It was a health crisis. It was an illness. And they didn't treat drug addicts as, some foreign alien or something. They treated them with compassion, but they were trying to understand. Is it because of lack of jobs? They're trying to understand the issue. If you solve the underlying issues, I know, from a technical Six Sigma background, we have something we call the 5 whys, right? We try to understand. You keep asking why. After 5 iterations, you try to get to the bottom line of why something's happened, right? They also have different technical things that we use, Ishikawa diagram, a whole fishbone diagram to get to the underlying issue. You have to understand the underlying issue before you can fix it. But here's the thing, to your question, Dennis, what's the way forward? Everybody knows the problem in Liberia. We've all seen it. And year after year after year, you can be on FOL, you can be on different platforms, you can criticize. Has that changed anything? Not really. Maybe sometimes it will force the administration to action if whatever the issue is really bad. But other than that, the actions doesn't make a complete 360 change that benefits a majority of the people. It might just be benefiting a small segment of the people. So what do we do to change it? We first need to start criticizing each other in the diaspora. The diaspora can be a great opportunity for change. We send between 300 to 500 million on a yearly basis in remittances. If we were to take some of that money and focus it into direct investments into specific areas, if we were to create the partnership over here, maybe we invest in a rehabilitation clinic. Maybe we have a diaspora investment fund that pays a certain amount back to investors that they can invest in maybe a water treatment plant or maybe even a solar grid or something in Liberia. If the diaspora came together and started working together and focusing on specific issues within the country, I think we can, because we rely on the government, it has never worked. It's never going to work because the people who are benefiting from the system will never change the system and hurt themselves. The criticism is like water on the duck's back. It will mean nothing to them. They don't have the kind of feelings that you can hurt. And if you catch them, they don't get prosecuted. So the way forward, let's try something a little bit different. Let Liberians start helping each other in the diaspora rather than getting on social media and castrating each other, because no amount of insult on social media has put medicines in a village. No amount of insult has been able to send a young boy to school over in one of the villages. So we need to change the way how we behave in the diaspora as well if we want to see that change reflected back home. So we need to set the example over here. If we're not doing that, we can criticize Boakai when he leaves. CDC might come back or someone else might come back. It will just be a complete cycle of the same things. So the way forward is for us to start doing something a little bit different in the diaspora. That's just my ending thing. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Elvis, I know you like my pictures.
Yeah, I like it, and I think maybe you've heard my complaints. You know, sometimes I complain about it, so maybe you heard me and you saw that I was justifying some of the things I was saying. But let me say this, Mr. Jai, I completely agree with Professor Kennedy. Right? I, as an individual, I don't have the resources or the power to do a lot of things that I would want to do. But I am looking for an organization, a credible organization where I can put my little small contribution that's credible enough that's going to be doing some work. For me, at this point in my life, I think it's time that I take more actions in Liberia. I think on an individual level, maybe I won't be as effective, but if, as part of a larger organization, perhaps I can be more useful to my country. And I think what Professor Kennedy is saying is that if there's an organization where we can pull our money together as a diaspora, where we have credible people running it, where we don't have to go to court and fighting over somebody that's appropriating the money, and there's an organization where we can use to, I'm 100% for that. Even this whole, say no to drug, thing, it seemed well organized. It almost seemed like there might be some people in government who are a part of it. But if it's a genuine movement and people within that movement are starting programs to help fight drug and help rehabilitate some of these kids who are on drugs, I want to be able to donate to those programs. I think it's time for more doing than talking. That's why some of us are kind of become disillusioned with the talking because it's like you're talking for years and things are still the same, and even in some instances worse. So like what Professor Kennedy is saying, I'm sure Mr. Eastman will echo that. It's time for action. The time for action is now, and we who have the minds and those who have the minds to put together organization, and for some of us to be father in that organization and bring our resources and our little contribution, I'm willing for it. I'm looking for the organizations to pop up, ones in Liberia that's credible and ones in the diaspora where we can contribute financially and with our services. I'm looking forward to it. It's time for action. Too much talking. Let's move on from that.
Thank you. And I remember you as a young man, one time you said, sometimes you get tired talking, so you would take a break. There's another young man, he used to come, he tells me, he said, talking Liberian issue, giving me gray hair. So he doesn't really want to talk anymore, or he doesn't want to be that involved anymore. So those of us that were teenagers before the war, it's like we're getting there. So if we have people like behind us that are getting tired or that are afraid of the gray, and so they're giving up, I don't want us to give up on Liberia, and I want us to keep fighting that indeed something is going to change. The people we see that one criticism bigger than the other, and all the things that we see, definitely they're going to go away. And at the end of the day, because other people who came before fought. If you think about it, slavery took like 400 years. Just imagine how many generations. And today we are the beneficiary of that because there's no slavery, right? 400 years, not 100, not 10, not 20, 400 years. Think about it. Jimmy, you're closing. And thank you for still being here with gray hair.
Well, you're right. We shouldn't give up. But here's what we need to do. I will reiterate just what Larry and Elvis been saying. We have to be doers now. We need to take stock every year. What did we do? We're talking about the drugs now. I think we spent a couple of shows on it. What individual contribution, what did we do this year to make to help resolve the issue? That is how we have to hold ourselves accountable. It's one thing sitting down here talking, but what have we physically done? Okay. And all our topics of discussion can be dealt in the same way. If you want to talk about we have to producing more, did you go and plant something in Liberia? Did you put up farm? We need to be doers, and we've been good talkers, but now it's time to do. And the way you can hold yourself to do something is every year you take stock. Say, what did you do? In relation to what you were talking about. What is your tangibles? What did you actually do that you can show us that you did? Once we hold ourselves to that kind of accountability, we will find ourselves doing things more than just talking. But yes, we can be doers, but we have to hold ourselves to that, and things will change.
Indeed, things will change, and that's what we are looking after. Gentlemen, thank you for tonight. I want to thank our viewers, those who are watching now, even those who will watch later, those who commented and contributed. If you watch sometime, we may not read your comments, but as a season or host, I incorporate all your comments into the question that I ask. So if you see me shining like this, it's all of you that put together, even those who call me and say, oh, I like how you presented the issue, why you didn't look at it this way, or help me to, make me, by far the best in the business. We're going to end here and end with our song that says, we are all Liberians. Whether you believe the fight on drugs will yield results or this just photo op that is a bridge to nowhere, we are all Liberians. What is incumbent upon all of us is to do our very, very best to make our country the glorious land of liberty. Good night and God bless you.
Bye-bye.
We are